Between the years 1800 and 1850, a cohort of roughly 20,000 individuals known as mountain men made their way into the unmapped wilderness of America. They confronted merciless winters, the gnawing pangs of starvation, and lethal encounters armed with little more than an axe, a rifle, and an indomitable will. If you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm curious where you're listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. These were the men who mastered the most unforgiving landscapes on the continent, relying on skills that modern society has all but consigned to oblivion. With their own hands and rudimentary tools, they could convert a dense forest into a shelter capable of enduring for generations. In the quiet hours, as night settles in one hemisphere and dawn breaks in another, we journey back in time. We are bound for the untamed frontier of the 1830s, a world forged by grit and framed by wilderness. Before we depart, however, find your comfort. Settle into your surroundings, adjust the pillows, and draw a blanket close. This is a tale that asks you to feel the chill before you find the warmth. Your eyelids part, admitting only a profound blackness. This is not the familiar gloom of a bedroom, softened by the distant glow of city lights filtering past curtains. It is an absolute, consuming void, a darkness so complete it feels tangible. The air itself declares the date, a frigid October morning in the year 1834, deep within a territory that will one day be called Montana. For now, it is simply the wild, an immense panorama of mountains and timber, governed by the single, unyielding statute of survival. The ground supporting you is compacted earth, frozen solid by the overnight chill, and every part of your body protests its unforgiving surface. In place of a soft mattress, you rest upon a thin layer of pine boughs that offers scant insulation from the cold ground. Your woolen blanket, stiff with a layer of frost, feels abrasive against your skin, and each exhalation forms a visible plume in the pre-dawn atmosphere. The fire you meticulously constructed the previous evening has dwindled to a collection of faint embers. A sharp sting from fresh blisters on your hands accompanies the effort of pushing yourself upright. The storm system that has been gathering for days is now drawing perilously close. Ominous clouds hang over the distant mountain peaks, and the wind carries the distinct, sharp fragrance of impending snow. Your time in these mountains has taught you to interpret such signs with unerring accuracy. This will not be a mere dusting. You have spent the last 3 days scouting for the ideal site, and yesterday, your search concluded. You discovered a small clearing situated on a gentle, south-facing incline, conveniently near a spring that promises not to freeze in the heart of winter. A dense stand of pines to the north provides a natural barrier against the wind, and from this vantage point, any approach can be seen from miles away. These were not arbitrary choices. Every decision is a matter of life and death when existence is this precarious. your supplies are perilously low. A few strips of dried jerky and a small pouch of salt are all that remain. Your rifle is propped against a nearby tree, and your axe, a handcrafted instrument with a head forged back in St. Louis, is embedded in a stump where you left it. An experience at a Wyoming museum comes to mind, where a curator explained that for these men, such axes were not mere tools, but extensions of their very lives, often valued more than gold. A mountain man would sooner sleep with his axe than risk its theft. As the first faint light of dawn struggles to pierce the dense forest canopy, you carefully stir the embers of last night's fire. You introduce some tinder, shredded cedar bark you've kept dry in your bag, and blow gently, coaxing the sparks into a fragile flame. Soon, the fire is robust enough to warm your hands and prepare a meager breakfast of jerky and the last of your cornmeal, mixed with water. An old mountain man, in an 1872 interview with a journalist, imparted a piece of wisdom. Pick your trees like you pick a wife. Straight, strong, and able to weather the storms. You approach the first selected tree, a pine approximately 14 inches in diameter and soaring nearly 100 feet high. After taking a deep breath, you swing your axe, the sharp edge biting satisfyingly into the bark. Wood chips fly as you carve a notch on the side facing the intended direction of its fall. Your arms are already burning from the exertion, but you persist. There is no time for rest when winter's arrival is imminent. Each swing of the axe is deliberate and calculated. This is not mindless chopping. It is a dialogue with the tree, a reading of its lean and balance, an understanding of its inevitable descent. Imagine the scene. You are entirely alone in this colossal wilderness. If this tree falls incorrectly, if it kicks back or veers from its intended path, there is no one to free you, no ambulance to summon, no hospital within 1,000 miles. A single miscalculation, and you become another nameless casualty of the frontier, a wilderness survival expert specializing in historical techniques. Once explained that these men developed a kind of sixth sense for trees. They could discern the subtle cues of a tree's fall, the weight distribution of its branches, the twist of its grain, even the influence of the wind. It was a combination of strength and an intimate, profound knowledge of their materials. The notch deepens, reaching nearly a third of the way through the trunk. You then move to the opposite side to make a slightly higher back cut. With a series of final, powerful swings, you hear the definitive crack that signals the tree is yielding. Stepping back quickly, your eyes remain fixed on the treetop as it sways, hesitates, and then capitulates to gravity. The crash reverberates through the forest, sending birds scattering from their perches. The impact shakes the very ground beneath your feet. You can almost smell the snow on the wind, 12 hours perhaps, before the storm hits. Now, the task is to limb the fallen tree, methodically cutting away all its branches to leave a clean trunk. Your axe makes quick work of the smaller limbs, while the larger branches require careful cuts to prevent the axe from binding. Every motion must be precise. Wasted energy is a luxury you cannot afford when you burn thousands of calories daily merely to stay alive. The sun climbs higher, but its warmth is fleeting. The wind is gaining strength, carrying the first few snowflakes. You work faster, stripping the tree to a bare log before moving to the next marked pine. By midday, your hands are raw. Blood seeps through the fresh blisters, making the axe handle slick and the grip even more painful. But you cannot stop. You must not stop. 3 massive trunks now lie parallel in the clearing. The alternative to this grueling labor is a shallow grave discovered come the spring thaw. Your stomach growls, a sharp reminder that you have not eaten since dawn. You pause only for a moment to chew a strip of jerky and drink from the nearby spring. The water is so cold it makes your teeth ache, yet it provides enough refreshment to continue. The next tree is thicker, nearly 2 feet in diameter. You circle it, assessing the best approach, and then begin to chop. Your muscles have found their rhythm, and despite the pain, each swing lands with practiced precision. But halfway through, disaster strikes. The axe head, loosened by thousands of impacts, suddenly flies off the handle and lands somewhere in the underbrush. Well, shit, you mutter, staring at the useless wooden handle. For a modern person, this would be an inconvenience. Out here, it is a potential death sentence. Your heart races as you scour the undergrowth. Losing your axe now would be catastrophic. You drop to your knees, frantically pushing aside leaves and twigs until you see it, the dull gleam of the metal head in the filtered sunlight. A wave of relief washes over you, but it is short-lived. The axe must be reattached, and quickly. From your possibles bag, you retrieve a small roll of rawhide. Soaking it in water from your canteen to make it pliable, you set to work. First, you carefully reshape the top of the handle, then wedge the head back on. You wrap the wet rawhide tightly around the join. As it dries, the rawhide will shrink, creating a bond almost as strong as iron. While you wait, you use your knife to continue limbing the fallen trees. It is slower, more tedious work, but not a moment can be wasted. A historical reenactor who specializes in mountain man skills once remarked that these men were not just survivors. They were problem solvers of the highest caliber: engineers, architects, doctors, hunters, weathermen, and warriors, all with a tool kit of perhaps 10 items total. After an hour, the rawhide has dried enough for you to cautiously resume your work. The axe head holds, but you will need to check it frequently. The first few swings are tentative, but soon you regain your former pace. The day wears on. 4 trees down, then 5, then 6. Your shadow stretches long across the clearing as the sun begins its descent. The temperature is dropping rapidly, and the snowflakes are becoming larger and more frequent. Your body is at its limit. Every muscle screams for rest. Blood has soaked through your buckskin gloves, and your vision blurs with exhaustion. But the simple shelter of pine boughs that protected you last night will not suffice against what is coming. You look up at the darkening sky. "Just give me till morning," you whisper, though to whom you are speaking, you are not sure. Perhaps to God, or perhaps just to the mountains themselves. As darkness falls, you build up your fire and force yourself to eat more jerky. You know you will need every calorie for the labor that awaits. The wind moans through the trees as snow begins to fall in earnest. You wrap yourself in your blanket beside the fire, your axe within arm's reach. Sleep comes instantly, your body surrendering to exhaustion. But even in slumber, your mind is at work, planning the next day's labor, calculating the notching of logs, the raising of walls, the construction of a roof. Out here, even dreams must be practical if one wishes to see the sunrise. Unlike the soft mattress and warm covers of a modern bed, your sleep is light and alert, ready to be broken by any unfamiliar sound. A mountain lion's scream, a wolf's howl, or the soft footfall of an approaching grizzly. We will pause our story here for tonight. Tomorrow, we will see if our mountain man can raise those walls before the full force of the storm arrives. For now, let the gentle weight of your blankets remind you how far we have come from those desperate days when shelter meant the difference between life and death. Imagine, as you drift towards sleep, what it would feel like to know that your survival depends entirely on what you can build with your own two hands before the storm arrives. Something is wrong. Your eyes snap open to complete darkness. For a moment, you are disoriented, but then it all comes rushing back. The clearing, the felled trees, the impending storm. The fire has died, that is what woke you. The bitter cold has seeped through your wool blanket and settled deep into your bones. You sit up, every muscle screaming in protest. Your hands are so stiff you can barely move them, the blisters, now frozen scabs, crack and bleed as you flex your fingers. A solid 3 inches of snow blankets the ground, a silent white shroud that fell while you slept. Your breath hangs in the air, a cloud of crystallized vapor. You check the eastern sky, but there is no hint of dawn. Every hour of daylight is now precious. A trapper named William Anderson once described waking in similar conditions. My beard had frozen to my blanket. When I tore free, it pulled out a patch of whiskers. My spit turned to ice before it hit the ground. But I knew that if I didn't move, I'd be stiff as a board by sunup. With aching fingers, you rake through the ashes, praying for a live coal. There, a faint orange glow buried deep within. You gently place your tinder of dry cedar bark over the ember and blow softly, rhythmically, coaxing it back to life. A tendril of smoke rises, and you methodically add twigs, building the fire. Fire is not just comfort out here, it is life itself. As the flames grow, you stand and stamp your feet, forcing blood back into your numb toes. You wolf down a strip of jerky and drink from your canteen, the water inside half-frozen slush. The forest is preternaturally quiet, muffled by the snow. "Gotta get moving," you mutter, your voice sounding strange after days of silence. Mountain men had a saying, "Dawn to dusk, swing that axe, or come spring, a bare S shitting on your grave." Not exactly poetry, but it conveyed the urgency. The snow complicates matters. You must clear it from the fallen logs before you can work them. Yesterday was about quantity. Today is about precision. Using a charred stick, you sketch a rough plan in a cleared patch of dirt. The cabin will be small, roughly 10 by 12 feet, just large enough for a sleeping platform, a fireplace, and some room to move. As the first gray light filters through the pines, you approach the first log. The bark must be removed. It holds moisture and attracts insects. You begin stripping the log with your axe, the bark coming away in satisfying chunks to reveal the pale, fresh wood beneath. A historian at a living history museum once noted that debarking a single log can take hours. Mountain men would spend days just prepping logs before they could even begin building. The work is tedious, but rhythmic. As you settle into the familiar pattern, your muscles warm, and the pain recedes to a dull throb. The sun finally crests the mountains, and for a moment, the beauty of the glittering snow takes your breath away. Then, a gust of wind cuts through your buckskins, a sharp reminder of the task at hand. You chew another strip of jerky as you work. Now comes the most challenging part, notching. The corners of your cabin will be held together by precisely cut notches. Get this wrong, and the walls will be unstable, full of gaps that let in wind and snow. Measuring is crucial. You pace off the dimensions again, then drag the first debarked log into position for the north wall. You mark both ends to receive the east and west wall logs. With your axe, you make a series of parallel cuts, then chop out the wood between them, forming a rough trough. The sun climbs higher, melting some of the snow. Your back is slick with sweat despite the cold. Each notch requires at least 20 minutes of careful chopping. Picture the scene. You stand in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, the mountains rising like blue giants in the distance. The fresh snow covers everything except the circle around your fire and the areas where you have been working. Your breath clouds in front of you, and your hands leave smears of blood on the pale wood. The only sounds are your axe biting into wood, your labored breathing, and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. 15 more logs are needed for the walls, plus more for the roof. You trudge through the snow, searching for straight pines with minimal taper. A forestry expert who studied these cabins explained that mountain men were incredibly selective, able to identify the 5 best trees in a stand of 100. They were craftsmen who understood their materials intimately. You spot a perfect candidate, a lodgepole pine, and begin chopping. Your technique has improved, and the tree falls exactly where you intended, its crash sending a puff of snow into the air. The day settles into a rhythm. Fell, limb, debark, repeat. Your body moves on autopilot, while your mind drifts to the warm trading posts on the Missouri, to St. Louis with its bustle and noise. A letter from a mountain man to his sister Reed. Sometimes I wonder if the towns still exist, or if they've all vanished like morning mist. The wilderness has a way of making civilization seem like a story someone told you once. By mid-afternoon, you have added 3 more trees to your stockpile. Your hands have gone beyond pain to a sort of numb detachment. The sky is darkening again, not just with the approach of evening, but with more weather. The storm is building. A sound wakes you, not the wind, not an animal, the distinct crunch of snow under a moccasin. Someone is approaching. Your hand slides to your rifle. Visitors are rarely friendly. It could be Blackfoot warriors, claim jumpers, or even a rogue grizzly. The footsteps pause, then a rough voice calls out, "Hello, the camp," coming in friendly. You sit up as two figures emerge from the trees. They are trappers, clad in buckskins, each with a rifle and an axe. "Name's Fitzgerald," says the tall one with a graying beard. "This here's Cooper. Spotted your smoke yesterday evening. Thought we'd check if he was alive or dead." In the vast wilderness, trappers often sought each other out before winter for safety and companionship. You lower your rifle slightly, but keep it close. Trust is earned slowly out here. "Beaver Creek down yonder, lousy with them," Fitzgerald continues. "But that storm coming ain't no joke. Saw you was building, figured maybe we could lend a hand, make it go faster." You study them carefully. Their gear is worn but well maintained, with no signs of the desperation that breeds danger. And truth be told, you could use the help. With the addition of Fitzgerald and Cooper, the work takes on a new rhythm. Fitzgerald, a veteran cabin builder, shows you a better notching technique he calls the saddle notch. "You don't want to cut straight across," he explains, demonstrating with his axe. "You want to round it like this, so the log above sits snug. Keeps the wind out better." His technique creates a curved depression that cradles the crossing log perfectly. Cooper, meanwhile, is a master at raising logs. With his stocky, powerful build, he devises a lever system using smaller logs as fulcrums. "Learned this from the Frenchies down on the Mississippi," he grunts, raising a log that would have taken you hours to position. The morning passes in a blur of coordinated effort. The walls climb steadily, 3 logs high, then 4. "You planning a fireplace?" Fitzgerald asks during a water break. You had been so focused on the walls that you hadn't considered it. But he is right. It is much easier to build around the opening than to cut through completed walls. An archaeological dig at an 1830s trapper cabin in Wyoming found that the fireplace foundation included buffalo bones and elk antlers mixed with the stones. The cabin walls now stand 5 logs high. The sky has darkened further, and fat flakes of snow begin to fall. "She's coming on faster than I figured," Cooper says with a frown. Fitzgerald nods grimly. "We've got maybe 5 hours of daylight left. Need to get them walls up to full height and start on the roof, or all this works for nothing." The roof presents a new challenge. Building a proper pitched roof requires rafters and more complex notching. "Ever built a roof before?" Fitzgerald asks, seemingly reading your mind. "First cabin." He spits into the snow. "Well, you picked a hell of a time to learn, but we'll get you squared away." As the afternoon wears on, the snowfall intensifies. You work through it, ignoring the wet and cold. The next log, the next notch, the next wall section. Cooper pauses, studying the walls critically. "Gonna need a ridge beam, something solid, and rafters coming down from it." Fitzgerald points to a tall, straight pine. "That one there would make a good ridge." The 3 of you fell the massive tree. With Cooper and Fitzgerald working in tandem, it comes down in minutes. "Now for the tricky part," Fitzgerald says. "We dig a hole there, bury a log halfway as an anchor, use ropes to guide the ridge beam up while we push from below." It is an ingenious, though labor-intensive, solution. You spend the next hour digging through the frozen ground to create the anchor point. Fitzgerald fashions a crude rope from rawhide strips, looping it around the heavy log. You position yourself at the bottom end, ready to push upward. On 3, Fitzgerald calls. 1, 2, 3. You heave with all your might. Inch by excruciating inch, the massive ridge beam rises. Steady, Cooper shouts as the beam wavers slightly. A log this size would crush anyone in its path if it rolled. Finally, it reaches the top of the walls. Fitzgerald scrambles up with surprising agility and lashes the beam into place. The sky is growing darker, both from the approaching evening and the intensifying storm. Need to get them rafters up before full dark, Cooper says, already moving to cut the smaller logs that will form the roof's framework. You have never worked so hard or so fast. With Fitzgerald directing, you and Cooper cut and position rafters, notching them at both ends to keep them from sliding. It is precise work made more difficult by the fading light and worsening weather. That'll hold for tonight, Fitzgerald says, surveying your work with satisfaction. Still needs a proper covering, but it'll keep the worst of the snow off. Cooper has already started a fire on the cabin's dirt floor. Smoke fills the upper portion of the space, but it is better than being fully exposed. The 3 of you huddle inside, passing a flask of whiskey that Cooper produces. The amber liquid burns as it goes down, spreading a welcome warmth through your exhausted body. Not bad for a day's work, Fitzgerald says, looking up at the roof framework. Would have taken me days on my own, you admit. Cooper shrugs. A man alone in these mountains for too long can wear down even the strongest spirit. A letter from a trapper to his wife read, "Today, 3 strangers helped me build my winter cabin. Tomorrow they'll be gone, and I may never see them again. But for one day, I remembered what it was to be part of mankind, not just a solitary animal." As night fully descends, the storm intensifies. The wind howls through the incomplete roof, but the walls block the worst of it. The fire casts dancing shadows on the log walls, and for the first time in weeks, you feel something close to safety. "You got a name?" Fitzgerald asks finally. You tell them. "Well," he says, "you picked a hell of a spot for your first cabin. Good water, good timber, decent protection from the north wind. You might just make it through winter." Coming from a veteran mountain man, it is high praise. Cooper pulls out some dried venison, tougher and darker than your jerky, and divides it among you. It is like chewing leather, but it is food you did not have to provide yourself. "Storm will blow itself out in a day or 2, he says. "We'll get that roof properly covered tomorrow. Maybe start on your fireplace if there's time." "Why are you helping me?" The question comes out before you can stop it. Fitzgerald and Cooper exchange a glance. It is Cooper who answers. "It ain't as complicated as that. Out here, where death is always just one mistake away, cooperation isn't charity, it's insurance." The fire crackles, sending sparks toward the open rafters. Outside, the world has disappeared into a swirling white void. But inside these 4 walls, there is warmth, food, and companionship. As exhaustion pulls you toward sleep, you look at what you have accomplished. Just days ago, these logs were living trees. Now, they are the beginning of a home. The howling wind that has been your constant companion has finally stopped. The storm has passed. Light filters through the gaps in the bark roof, casting dappled patterns on the dirt floor. The cabin has retained its warmth remarkably well. Cooper and Fitzgerald are still sleeping. You rise silently, adding sticks to the fire. Outside, the world is transformed. Everything is white, pristine. Snow blankets the clearing in drifts that reach halfway up the cabin walls. "Storm S done," Fitzgerald says behind you, his voice rough with sleep. "Gonna be cold as a witch's tit today, though." The cabin has withstood its first test. The roof held, the walls kept out the wind. It is far from finished, but it protected you. The first order of business is covering the roof. "Purlins," Fitzgerald says, gesturing to the smaller logs needed for cross pieces. "We'll lay them across the rafters, then cover the whole thing with bark or boughs." You and Cooper begin felling smaller trees, while Fitzgerald strips large sheets of pine bark from fallen logs. "Let off in big sheets, overlap them like shingles," he explains. "Won't last forever, but it'll keep the snow out till spring." Working in the deepening snow is exhausting. Your boots are soaked, your fingers numb. But the three of you establish a rhythm. Cooper cuts, you haul, Fitzgerald positions. By midday, you have laid all the purlins. The next step is lifting the heavy sheets of bark onto the roof. Cooper fashions a crude ladder, and Fitzgerald climbs up while you and Cooper pass up the bark. The process is slow and precarious. Fitzgerald balances on the snow-slick rafters. For a heart-stopping moment, he slips, one foot sliding off a purlin. He throws his weight backward, barely catching himself. "Son of a bitch," he gasps. Cooper shakes his head. "Told you you're too old for roof work." "And I told you to kiss my ass," Fitzgerald retorts. But there is no real heat in his words. A memoir from a trapper named William Hamilton described a similar close call. "Slipped from the roof beam, caught myself by one arm, dangled there 20 feet up, certain I was bound for glory. Jenkins grabbed my wrist and hauled me back up like I was no heavier than a rabbit. Never said a word about it after. By early afternoon, half the roof is covered. Where the bark does not quite meet, Fitzgerald stuffs the gaps with moss and pine needles. While he continues on the roof, you and Cooper turn your attention to the fireplace. The east wall has an opening about 4 feet wide. "Need rocks," Cooper says, heading toward the creek. "Big ones for the base." The creek is partially frozen, but along its banks are smooth river rocks half buried in snow. You roll them up the slight incline to the cabin, back-breaking work in the cold. Cooper arranges the largest stones in a semicircle against the east wall opening. You mix dirt from the cabin floor with melted snow and pine needles to create a thick, sticky mud for mortar. Cooper packs it between the stones, creating a crude but effective bond. The base of the fireplace takes shape, and Cooper begins building upward with smaller stones. "Need a good deep firebox," he explains. Heat bounces off the back wall, radiates into the cabin. A historical reconstruction specialist once explained that the back wall should angle forward slightly to reflect more heat, a principle still used in modern fireplace design. While you fetch more rocks, Fitzgerald completes the roof and begins working on a proper door. A simple affair made from split logs lashed together with rawhide. As daylight begins to fade, Fitzgerald hangs the door on leather hinges. It is rough, but it will keep out the snow. Moment of truth, he says. You lay a fire in the new fireplace. For a moment, smoke billows into the cabin and your heart sinks. But then, as the fire grows, the smoke begins to draw upward, pulled by the draft of the properly constructed chimney. There she goes, Fitzgerald says with satisfaction. It is a triumph. You have walls, a roof, and now a fireplace. Cooper grins, the first genuine smile you have seen from him. Reckon we earned our supper. The howling wind has finally stopped. The storm has passed. Light filters through the small gaps in the bark roof. 3 days of constant work have followed, finishing the floor, building crude furniture, sealing every gap against the long winter. The partnership forged in necessity is ending. Fitzgerald and Cooper are preparing to leave. Appreciate the help, you say, the simple words carrying the weight of your gratitude. Fitzgerald waves it off. You'd have done the same for us. The cabin is transformed. The rough, split-plank floor covers the entire dirt surface. A small table and a 3-legged stool stand against the west wall. Most importantly, every crack between the logs has been chinked with a mixture of mud, moss, and pine needles. Not half bad, Fitzgerald says, surveying the interior with approval. Better than my first cabin. Just remember, winter ain't a sprint. It's a long, slow walk. Take it one day, one chore, one log at a time. After a final breakfast, Cooper and Fitzgerald gather their few possessions. Where's your cabin, you ask? Down by the fork, Fitzgerald replies, gesturing vaguely southward. About half a day's walk. You offer them your crude snowshoes, but they decline, having their own back at camp. They do accept a portion of the smoked rabbit meat. Meat is currency in these mountains. They depart without looking back. That is the way out here. Suddenly, you are alone again. The cabin feels larger, quieter. You lean against the door, surveying your domain. It is crude, but it is solid. It will keep you alive. Now begins the next phase, preparing for the long isolation. Records from fur companies show that approximately 1 in 5 mountain men died during their first winter alone, not from dramatic attacks, but from starvation, illness, or simple accidents. As a personal touch, you find the stub of a pencil and begin marking the days on a flattened section of log wall. Today is October 28, 1834. The simple act of marking time transforms the space. The cabin is no longer just shelter. It is becoming your home. As darkness falls, you eat alone. The silence, a stark contrast to the companionship of the past few days. A trapper's journal entry read, "First night alone in my new cabin." The silence is complete. I caught myself talking to the walls earlier just to hear a human voice. Your first priority is food. You spend the morning setting snares along game trails near the creek. Next is firewood. A cabin this size will consume an enormous amount of wood. You drag fallen logs from the forest, cutting them into manageable lengths. By midday, a substantial woodpile stands against the south wall. Inside, you organize your meager supplies on newly built shelves: flint and steel, a pouch of precious salt, needle and sinew, extra lead balls and powder, a whetstone. Your rifle hangs on pegs above the door, your axe leans in a corner. You consider the months ahead, 5 months of isolation, cold, and constant vigilance. But tonight, there is a deep sense of accomplishment. The sleeping platform, padded with pine boughs, is almost comfortable. The fireplace radiates a steady, penetrating heat. The following days are spent making final improvements. You seal the remaining gaps with mud and ashes. You add a second layer of bark to the roof, fashion a crude door for the window opening. You also create an emergency cache of supplies 50 yards from the cabin, a common practice among mountain men. If disaster struck, this small stash could mean the difference between life and death. You dig a hollow, place fire-starting materials, a knife, ammunition, and jerky inside, then cover it with rocks and snow. As the first true blizzard of winter descends, you are ready. The wind shrieks, and snow piles against the walls. But inside, you are secure. Cabin stands firm. A strange satisfaction settles over you, a feeling captured in a letter from a mountain man to his brother. I feel a deeper satisfaction in this crude cabin I built with my own hands than in any fine house I ever entered. Every log, every stone represents my own will to live. Tonight, you rest, knowing you have transformed raw wilderness into shelter. The firelight flickers, casting warm, dancing shadows. Outside, the temperature plummets. Inside, you are warm, sheltered, alive. Here, every moment of comfort is earned. Every night survived is a victory. As sleep begins to claim you, your thoughts drift to Cooper and Fitzgerald. They should have reached their own cabin by now. Come spring, your paths might cross again. This knowledge provides its own kind of comfort. Your last thought before sleep is simple but profound. I built this asterisk. With these hands, I built this. As you drift into dreams, perhaps your thoughts mingle with those listening to this story, warm in their own beds, separated from these harsh realities by centuries. Perhaps they too feel a whisper of connection to those who carved shelters from the wilderness with nothing but determination and simple tools. Perhaps they too understand what it meant to build a home in the wild, one log at a time. The fire burns low, the cabin stands strong against the night, and inside, a mountain man sleeps, ready to face whatever tomorrow brings. Rest well, knowing the human spirit has always found ways to create warmth and shelter, even in the most challenging circumstances.